Hello, my name is Liza Maria, and today, as a guest on my podcast, we have Philip Linden. And Philip is passionate about space, exactly like I do, and about podcasting, and also spending time with his family and his cute dogs. And Phil also does lunar research in a few different projects. Hi, Phil. How are you doing today?
Hey, Eliza, I'm doing great.
That's great. So, Phil, to start off, can you tell us more about you, like your career working with space and lunar projects?
Yeah. So I've been working in space for about the last 10 years in satellite mission operations. Um, just recently, a couple of years ago, I took a research fellowship with the Open Lunar Foundation, which was sponsored by Moondao. And since then, I've been just I dove headfirst into lunar research with both Open Lunar Foundation and Moondown. I've been active in both ever since. So that research primarily has to do with timekeeping and the question of, when you're on the moon, time passes differently because physics, due to special relativity and general relativity. If you had a perfect clock on the moon and on Earth, and they were absolutely ideal. Like there was nothing, they didn't drift at all. There was no electrical noise. There was no imperfections. Their times would still get out of sync because space time is different. It's warped differently on the moon. Um, and the modern world, the entire internet is depends on a shared understanding of what time it is. Um, so that could be, that's a problem, right? There's a problem here, and that's what my research has really been trying to understand and trying to propose an answer to.
That's awesome. And do you have any stories like from your space career or with your own lunar projects you really like to share with us here today?
Oh man, um, yeah. One story. Okay, what kind of vibe do you want? I've got a
Like
few stories in mind.
any story you want to share with us here.
Okay. Um, so one story that I think is just interesting in working in a global society um, is I work for Planet Labs for my main job, and I work on imaging. So I'm like the camera guy for one of our missions. Um, the camera people, the people that calibrate the camera and deal with everything, are in Berlin, Germany. I'm in um, New York, USA. Um, and the headquarters of the company is in San Francisco, USA. So we're all distributed. Um, and uh, what's funny is that sometimes I end up staying up late playing video games or something like that, right? And it was 2 a.m. and something went completely crazy, completely wrong, and everybody was panicking. Not really panicking, but like it was emotionally tense. And then I just like popped in there and said like, "Hey," and helped out and fixed the situation and stuff. And then I went back to bed and I didn't think anything of it. And then the next day, like people were like, "Phil, why were you awake?" So my relationship with time has not been the best. Um, Another story that I think is really fun is just recently Moondao had a sweepstakes to go in ZeroG. Um, in addition to the sweepstakes, you could purchase a ticket. Part of the price went to um, uh, a charity that's dedicated to getting more people involved in space, and bringing art to space and everything like that. So anyway, I got a ticket because once in a lifetime opportunity. I flew down to Florida, where we were flying out of for the Kennedy Space Center, and I met up with Pablo. We were talking and waiting for other people to arrive. This one guy, we're in a conference room watching a Zoom conference, and this one guy's like, excuse me, I have an interview in here. Like, can I use this room? And we're like, yeah, sure, buddy. And we let him use it, and we walk away. Later on, we see him at the bar, and we're like, oh, hey. I'm like, how'd your interview go? And he's like, wait a minute. The person sitting across from him was Charlie Duke, Apollo astronaut on Apollo 16, and Capcom for Apollo 11. Big deal. I didn't know that. I just thought it was an old guy. And he's like, yeah, I flew in this morning. I was like, okay, cool. And he's like, yeah, I flew Charlie in too. And I'm like, wait a minute. This is Charlie Duke? He's like, yeah. And so this guy that I was just like had thought nothing of, and when I saw him at the bar, we were just messing around, right? Like I was teasing him a little bit and stuff. Turns out he's a big deal. And just like the way people are people, and it doesn't matter your history, and you can still connect with people on that fundamental level. But at the same time, this like Charlie Duke, this man who walked on the moon multiple times, who was the lifeline for the first people to ever set foot on the moon, was just, having a beer, and we were chatting about the weather. Like those things are incredible opportunities that I don't know if you can get that anywhere other than space, like being involved in space, and not just working, but like being
Yes.
interested in going to these events and stuff. Yeah.
And how was it like to fly in ZeroG? Like, because you mentioned this, and I mean, I think that's really cool. And
Yeah. So if you've seen Ellie and Space's video on
yes.
this, I was on the same flight, and I actually show up in the background in one of the in one of her shots. Yes, I threw up, but only at the very end. What's interesting is that as being in ZeroG, the first time it happened, like it's just kind of like everything releases, and like nothing is different until you move, and then you just keep moving, right? I could not stop giggling. I couldn't breathe because I was giggling, and it was uncontrollable. I don't know. It was the weirdest feeling. And then after that, it was like swimming. Like it was just like my body was like moving naturally until I tried to move in a particular direction, and then I lost control. And at one point, I curled up into a ball and was hurtling through the middle of the plane,
Oh, yes.
bumping into people. So yeah, it was surreal, but like my brain just accepted it after only a few minutes, which is really surprising to me. And as far as discomfort goes, yes, I threw up, but I threw up because I tried to move around when we were under 2 Gs of acceleration. So the plane goes, it's just a regular plane, and it goes in parabolic arcs. So in order to get to 0G, that's when the plane is doing a nosedive. And then in order to get back up to altitude to do another nosedive, they need to pull up. And to do that, it's extra acceleration down. And I love the 0G, but the 2G, the extra, like where your body feels twice as heavy, killed me. I got dizzy. I ended up trying to move my head like side to side while I was laying on the floor. I screwed up my neck for like the next 2 weeks. And it made me so dizzy that I ended up, that's why I threw up, was because I moved around in 2G. So yeah, it's surreal. And, it's one of those things that I think there are two things that every human should experience. I don't think every human will experience this until like some decades from now. Every human should experience 0G and should experience seeing the arc of the Earth from space, seeing the curvature of the Earth and seeing the Earth from a distance. That's something I haven't had the chance to do yet, but I really think those two things are profound, and change your perspective of what it means to be human.
I think flying in ZeroG is really cool, and especially if I will get the chance, like in the future, I will try for sure. And the next question here is, do you have any other hobbies than space? And
Yeah, quite a few. Um, my main passion. So I'm a type of person that I need two things in order to stay, you know, sane. I need something to deliver like 100% focus on a singular task for a period of time. And then I also need a creative outlet. And I found one on either end, and then I just found one that's sort of in the middle. So on one end, I bought a motorcycle. And in order to ride the motorcycle and to control it, to be safe, and to be aware of my surroundings and everything, my brain just forgets everything else, and I'm just riding the motorcycle. And it's wonderful. And on the other hand, uh, I play tabletop RPGs, tabletop role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and other things like that. Um, and I'm the game master. So instead of writing a novel, I just kind of write the outline and sit down with some friends and we riff on each other and the story emerges. And so that's a really good creative outlet. And just recently, I took up photography. This is a 35 millimeter film camera.
wow, that's cool.
Um, it's from 1973, still works great. And yeah, so I found some of that in my grandpa's house and started playing with it. And taking a good picture takes a lot of focus, but it's also a creative expression. So um, that's my recent uh, passion.
That's awesome because I also have as one of my passions. Of course, I also have space and other things, but I'm also an artist.
Mhm.
I do painting. I went to painting competitions last year, and
Congrats.
I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, and the creativity and like art, people see space as such a technical field, and yes, it is technical, right? But it's such a it's so hard to describe because it's so otherworldly and things. It can only be expressed through art, right? And so I think people with creativity and with the artist's eye um, really have a place in space exploration, human space flight, and astronomy for sure.
Yes. And do you have any ideas for any research in the future, like anything other than lunar research or anything?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my main thing right now that I'm trying to make a reality is right now, like the governments of the world and space agencies of the world recognize that time is an issue, right? Coordinated time is difficult between things on Earth, things on the moon, and beyond. Um, and so it seems like there's consensus that there should be sort of an agreed upon time standard. My research idea is to make that real and make like a service, like a system, a utility to coordinate time across the solar system using um, small scale, chip scale atomic clocks. And I truly believe that we're on the cusp of being able to do that on a cheap level. So instead of like $2 million per atomic clock, sorry if you can hear my dog squeaking,
It's
he's
fine.
annoyed that I'm talking. Um, instead of $2 million per atomic clock, that's precise enough. I think we can get that down 2 orders of magnitude or three. I think thousands of dollars, under $10,000, is actually reasonable with today's technology to have very accurate clocks that could maintain such a service. And so trying to figure out how to get that from idea to reality um, is my main research goal. Um, but I'm the type of person that I can get excited about a lot of different things, and there's a lot of cool ideas floating around Moondao specifically. So I tend to be a hype man for crazy ideas.
That's great. And uh, what's the coolest project you've ever did as an engineer with space or
Oh man, I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of really cool stuff. Um, I don't know. It's hard to just say the coolest one. I've just been kind of riding this wave of following interesting things. And at different every point in my career, I would have said something different. So early on in my career, I was an intern at SpaceX working on the Dragon capsule, and I put my heart and soul into that project. And then my internship ended a few months before the launch, and so I was sitting around with my family, and the launch goes up, we're watching it, and then halfway through, it explodes, and my family's like, "Yeah, that was awesome," and I'm like, you know, um, but that was our like transformative project for me because I was the only person tasked with a job, and I didn't know how to do it. And my boss was like, I said, "How do I do this?" He said, "I don't know, figure it out. Like that's your project." And that was transformative for me. And then more recently, um, playing around with satellites. We have some satellites in the fleet that have downtime where they're not um, delivering products to customers. And in that downtime, um, I found safe ways to experiment. And one of the ways is looking at the moon or Jupiter, for example, with our telescopes that are meant for looking at Earth. And so figuring out that how do you point in an arbitrary direction and take an image at a certain point in time was really fun. And then that led into something really interesting. We published a paper last year, 2023. It ended up winning an award for best paper in track at IEEE Aerospace, where a new satellite, one of our upcoming ones, uh, will use like this weird imaging technique where you uh, collect light from that's been reflected off the ocean. So you're not actually looking at the ground, you're looking at the light that's passed through the atmosphere and measuring that. And it's a hard problem to solve. You have to get it just right and look at the right angle to see the glint. And the paper we wrote was like, we have satellites on orbit already. They can't do the science, but they can do the job. And so we got creative and actually like made those satellites act like a different one in order to test out our algorithms, and that was insanely cool. And yeah, it's just one of the using things that are not meant to using a system for something that it's not meant for is kind of some like a secret desire for me always. So yeah.
And the last question here, have you ever faced any problems working as an engineer or with lunar projects?
Oh yeah. Um, so do you mean projects in terms or problems in terms of technical, like where I didn't know the answer, or problems in terms of working in the space industry with other people and with companies?
Like working with other people and
Yeah. Um, one problem that keeps coming up for me is so I'm as a person, you know, my heritage and upbringing and everything, I've been very fortunate. I have a lot of privilege. I am a 30 something uh, white American man with a higher education degree. And um, working in the industry for like 10 years now, what it really has been getting under my skin is the lack of people from diverse backgrounds. There's a lot of, depending on the company, some companies are better than others. But I think the talent is everywhere, from everywhere. And uh, even if someone doesn't have like a traditional background that you'd expect from someone that's really effective in space flight technology and stuff, that doesn't mean that they're not capable. And so one of the biggest problems has been acknowledging, like trying to advocate for more diverse and a more inclusive mindset for people. A lot of times they don't even realize they're doing that they're excluding people. They don't consciously realize it. And unfortunately, the biggest problem that's happened a few times has been my colleagues who are women. When we talk about our careers, our compensation, and find out that like we're doing basically the same job, we're working together, and I see them as teammates, and then we find out that we're not being compensated the same, or that for me, all I had to do was ask for a promotion, and they're like, sure, and then for them, they had to fight for it for like years at a time in order to get the same promotion as me. Um, that's been the biggest problem. Is and in every case, there hasn't been intentional suppression of other people's progress or anything. Uh, from the companies, like the corporate standpoint, and from the people, the supervisors, the managers, there's been like no bad blood, right? It's just like seeing this person's normal life, going through their normal life, and they think everything's normal. I go through my life and I think everything's normal. And then when we compare them, we're like, whoa, there's a big difference here. So that's the most important problem that I've seen recently in my career.
Well, thank you, Phil, for joining me here today on this cool podcast. It was really nice speaking with you about your lunar research and all the things you did, and good luck in the future with everything.
Thanks, Eliza. This was a lot of fun.